Yo guys, what is good? Welcome back on the Uncle Sharma channel. We are back once again with a live stream scout report. Again, I've been changing it up. Before they used to be always recorded and edited, but now I've changed it up a little bit, bring on an expert guest who can tell us more about the player. And today, of course, we are covering Mehdi Taremi, who today was spotted at Milano airport. I don't know if that's Malpensa or Linate, but he was at the airport today, so his move should be made official any moment now, maybe today, tomorrow, this week for sure. And to cover it all, I have an expert of Portuguese football with me, Alba. You might recognize him. Real fans of the channel might recognize him from a couple of years ago when we previewed Inter versus Porto in the Champions League. But he is here from the Long Ball Futebol podcast. Albert, what's up, bro?
It's a pleasure to be here, mate. I love the use of the word expert. To be honest, if I think about myself and Mehdi Taremi, I wouldn't even use the word expert. I just use the word fan, man. I've loved watching this guy play. We're going to talk a lot about a lot of different stuff, but Mehdi Taremi ever since he's been in Portugal has just been one of the most enjoyable players to watch. So from our perspective, obviously there's a sense of sadness that we're not going to be watching him in the Portuguese league anymore, but I think a lot of people have a lot of good feeling towards Taremi, and this type of move to a big club is what we've kind of hoped for him in a way, like one more shot at a big club. So we're all excited, and I'm excited to talk about him.
Yeah, and Albert, if you don't know, so he's, as I said, his podcast is focused on Portuguese football, but he isn't actually a fan of any Portuguese team. So actually, he's a neutral, which I like because he's not like shout out to Dom, who was a Napoli fan we brought on for the Zielinski preview. But you could tell that Dom has got those fresh, salty feelings of a free transfer guy leaving for like no money coming in. So Albert can give us a more balanced view on he doesn't have any horse in this race.
I'll do my best.
Yeah, I mean, let's get straight into it, Albert. I mean, we're going to try and cover this transfer or the scout report before the France-Spain game kicks off. We've got the big game going on, so we'll try our best. So I also want to watch. I'm sure probably Albert wants to watch it. So we'll try to cover everything off. And yeah, before we get started, guys, please make sure you leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. I won't be able to interact as much with the live chat as I usually do. We're just trying to cover, a few things as quickly as possible. I appreciate the support in the chat. Thank you, guys. So Albert, Mehdi Taremi, starting off with quickly his bio. Who is he? Born 18th of July 1992, so he's just about to turn 32 actually. So his birthday's coming up soon in a few days. From Bushehr, Iran, 1m85, 6'1", so decent sized striker. Most of his career spent building up slowly. I think he's a bit of a late peaker actually. He started off in the Iranian leagues, lower leagues, got his breakthrough at Persepolis. Then today I found out Al Gharafa because Wesley Sneijder spoke about it. He made a quick video saying, Inter fans, you got a great player on your hands because him and Sneijder played at Al Gharafa. I never knew in Qatar.
I was trying to work out when Sneijder played in Rio Ave, man. I was like, what's going on?
Yeah. And then, Rio Ave, he got his move to Portugal, which then he moved on to Porto for the last 4 years. So he actually had just a 4-year contract with Porto that he never renewed. Which was quite interesting. I thought he must have renewed at some point, but actually that was just they signed him on a 4-year, and the original contract is what he stuck through. And he's leaving Porto after 122 appearances, 64 goals, which is a really, really good tally. And of course, we know he's a linchpin of the Iranian national team. 85 appearances, 50 goals. Their best player, obviously. Albert, this is Mehdi Taremi. What can you tell us? I mean, tell us a little bit about him over the years as well. Like you've seen him at Rio Ave as well. Like, what type of player is he? How has he developed over the years?
Well, it was he's got such a great, fascinating career because Portugal's the only club in Europe he's ever played at. That's the only country in Europe he's ever played in. Excuse me. So rare for a player to spend so much time in. Not playing in Europe and yet still make it to a big club like this. I mean, you sometimes see it with South America where maybe a player will play in Brazil or Argentina till they're sort of 23, 24. But once they start getting to 25 years old, you start to think it's not really going to happen for them in Europe. And then to come from Asia as well, not even South America or the MLS or a league with a more kind of international coverage. I mean, I'm not sure there's many people outside of Iran who are watching
Mhm.
Iranian league football, and he
Very
moved
modest transfer fees, right? Like there's
exactly that. So I wish I knew more about. Excuse me. I wish I knew more about how the transfer to Rio Ave came about. Like, I wish I knew what the connection was. Maybe there was a connection with an agent or something like that. I don't actually know the details, but whoever it was that in Portugal who saw Taremi playing in Iran, and actually he was playing in Qatar
in Qatar. Yeah.
before he moved directly to Rio Ave. So whoever saw him playing in these leagues at 25, 26 years of age and thought this is an opportunity to bring a great player over, really really deserves a lot of credit, because it was a great bit of scouting. And yeah, you can see that Rio Ave is not a club with a lot of money, so they wouldn't have put a big transfer fee on it, like you say, free transfer, but they made a lot of money out of the sale to Porto. So like you say, he played 1 year at Rio Ave. It was a great season for Rio Ave. Their manager was someone people might be familiar with, Carlos Carvalhal. If you follow English football, he was at Swansea and Sheffield
Oh,
Wednesday and
yeah.
one other club in England, I believe, and he's managed sort of around Europe, so he's a good manager. And Rio Ave kind of had this period where they had this manager who, if we're being honest, they were lucky to have. His whole situation was he'd managed in the Premier League and he'd managed in Europe, but he had a family issue. I think a close family member was ill. He wanted to move back to Portugal and essentially made himself available to the types of clubs where normally he wouldn't be managing. But he
Mhm.
took over at Rio Ave, and they had some great players in this period. They finished fifth in the league with Mehdi Taremi in that season. I think Taremi
Wow.
got something like, he got about 20 goals basically. He's basically scored 20 goals a season every season he's been in Portugal, and he was kind of a real star of this exciting team who had this amazing season. Gets the move to Porto off the back of it. Very, very shrewd move by Porto. This was at a time when they were buying players from within the league. This is I'm not sure if it's the same in Italy, but there's always this kind of conversation about whether the top clubs in Portugal, it's really worth buying players from lower down in the league. It's kind of seen as not really a very exciting transfer. It's not really like glamorous, but Porto made some good signings in that period. They also signed Zaidou Sanusi. He went on to play a lot of games for them at that kind of time. So it was a incredibly shrewd move for Real to get him in the first place, and then a very shrewd pickup for Porto to get him, because obviously the rest is history. He went on to score a lot of goals for Porto. He's been the standout, one of the standout strikers in this league for the last 5 years, and that includes a league which had strikers like Darwin Núñez, who obviously got a big move to Liverpool and players like that. So he's been, it's been a fantastic career. It's really hard not to like this guy. He's got such a great story and he's been so successful, and he seems like a really humble guy as well. So he's been fantastic for the last 4 or 5 years in Portugal.
What is it that makes him so likable? Because like on the outside, when Inter played against him, or even when I watched Juve or Milan playing against him in the Champions League, he's got like a bit of edge about him. He can get riled up. He can be quite passionate. I've even, his reputation on diving is a little bit also. I've seen him dive around a lot. I've even seen him getting booked.
Sure.
Well, tell us what makes him so likable. What's his story that you mentioned?
Well, perhaps this is where my position as a neutral does help in terms of reputation. I think if you was to ask a Benfica fan what they thought of Mehdi Taremi, they probably wouldn't have too much nice things to say about him. I think, like I said, his kind of background and his story is what makes you want him to succeed, and also the way he's just constantly delivered on the pitch. He's just eternally reliable. I think he is one of those players. It's not a perfect comparison, but if you look at a player like Pepe, the centre back who plays for Portugal and Porto, he's like a typical, like, on field he has a different personality to off the field, and off the field he's like very nice and likable personality. Mehdi Taremi has that. His on-field antics are slightly different to someone like Pep's. It's not like aggression. It's more like, he has a kind of sneaky side to him, to put it politely, which I'm sure fans of the team that he's playing for appreciate. The fans that he's playing against probably dislike a lot, but Inter fans, I'm sure, will probably enjoy what he gives to the team. But yeah, it's all about just the commitment he's given to the club and to his performances and what he's been able to achieve. And he's been really enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, I mean, we've got an Iranian in the house here who was saying that Still he's a decent striker, dives a lot, not very clinical, which we'll get to. Also not a popular character since he's shown support for the totalitarian government of Iran. So I'm sorry, I don't want to get involved in that side of things, but do you know anything about how he's perceived in general? Like, is he? Yeah, sorry, continue.
No, it's a great point. I actually didn't know that side of things at all. So I think he's a very popular figure in Portugal. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't know. I don't really know about his international career.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we looked at his record: 85 appearances, 50 goals. Bloody hell! Like that looks really, really impressive to me. But I've also seen him, like at some moments for Iran, I've seen him lose his head. I've seen him getting sent off in a big game. I think it was last year or a couple of years ago against Syria. But
can I quickly actually talk about the diving thing? It's probably good just to briefly talk about it because, like you say, it's kind of like a thing people talk about. He has got a little bit of a reputation, and I think some of it is deserved. But I would actually defend him in that case because and we'll come on to talk about exactly what type of player he is. But he's a striker, right? His job is to be the last man, the final forward, and I think a big part of a striker's job, especially a more like traditional striker like Taremi. Winning fouls is kind of part of his job, and I would find it hard to say I've ever looked at Taremi and thought he's trying to cheat. I think you could point to one or two occasions where he's probably got it wrong. He's taking it too far and he's let himself down in terms of diving. But I would say 7-8 times out of 10, all he's doing is trying to do what any clever player should do and win a foul. And with that comes exaggerations, or it comes like the sense that he's created a situation for him to be fouled or created a situation to win a foul. But for me, I think I would defend him slightly in that is kind of part of football. But of course, I'm aware that when you play that game and when you try and add that to your repertoire as a player, then you always run the risk of getting it wrong and looking stupid and embarrassing yourself. And he has been guilty of that, of course. Like he's not perfect, but he is a striker, and part of his job is to win fouls and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's as you said, it's a striker's job. Lautaro's also got a reputation for that in Italy. I think the reputation comes when I feel like with Taremi, sometimes I feel like he's not actually very good at diving, if you know what I mean. Like you kind of oversells it. Lautaro has that issue sometimes where it doesn't look like he's got that, skill of Quadrado, someone that comes to mind, someone that can win you a penalty out of nothing. But actually, speaking of penalty, and someone just pointed out, he's actually got a very, very good penalty record over his career. 87%, according to this website called Footy Stats. 54 taken, 47 scored, only 7 missed. That's really, really good. And that's something that we need in the team because Hakan is our penalty taker and he's got 100% record with Inter. But after that, it's a bit shaky. Lautaro is not the most reliable guy. And he takes big penalties. I've seen him score big penalties, right? Like cup finals.
Yeah, and that's part of his mentality. He's not easily phased, I don't think.
Yeah, would you class him as I really mainly tune when it comes to Portuguese football? I mainly tune to Benfica, Porto, Sporting Lisbon. He strikes me as a guy who steps up in the big games. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Well, you might have seen it in the Champions League as well. He scored big goals in the Champions League as well, which I think is a good sign. So yeah, absolutely. Like that mentality side of things, I don't definitely characterize him as a player who struggles with occasion or pressure. I've never seen that side of him. Other players, like for example, because there was a time when we were comparing him a lot to Darwin Núñez because they were playing in the league at the same time. Darwin Núñez was a player who I would have characterized absolutely as someone who struggled with the mentality side of the game, whereas Taremi, I think that's much stronger. I'm not sure where it comes from. Maybe it just comes from his background. Maybe he's got nothing to lose, but he doesn't seem to be fazed by big occasions.
That's really good. Yeah, we always want guys that have that type of mentality. I just want to give a quick shout out to Prinolin, who's given a quick little donation. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And he also became a channel member. Really, really appreciate that. And Mohammed Farah has a really good question that we'll get to that one second. I appreciate the donation, but we're actually going to get to that. And Palm actually has made a quick insight. He's been giving insights into the chat, so I appreciate that. So apparently his relationship with Carlos Queiroz is the reason why he got a move to Real Ave. So that's really
interesting connection. I didn't know that myself, so that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's really good. One other positive thing I wanted to talk about Taremi is the injury record. I mean, Transfermarkt sometimes is not super reliable on these things, but according to them, he literally has not been injured apart from once in 1920, because the other one is coronavirus. Like, this guy is made of something
He
special.
did have an injury. He did have an injury this season, sort of low level injury, but yeah, he's been pretty good.
Yeah. So that's, yeah, you see, like, the Transfermarkt, I always say to people, take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes they don't always record every single niggling small injury, but
He's played a lot of games. He's played a
yeah,
lot of games.
that's a fantastic sign, especially if we compare it to Arnautovic, who we signed. You know, he already had a big red flag injury history when we signed him from Bologna, and yeah, it bit us in the arse in the end. So that's really, really good to see, the fact that he, as a, he's coming in potentially to be the backup to Lautaro and Thuram. So you want that guy to be available in case Lautaro and Thuram get injured. So that's a really, really good sign. And the fact that he's kind of like a late peaker, that he only really came to Europe late as well. I feel like his body's not, even though he's 31, about to be 32, I don't think his body's been through such a intense career as like a lot of other players might be by his age. Do you know what I mean, Albert? You agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And with the Portuguese league as well, I wouldn't say it's as strenuous a league as, for example, Italy or other of the top 5 leagues.
Yeah. One negative aspect, I mean, we kind of touched upon it on Transfermarkt. If I go on his suspension record, you can see he's kind of, he does tend to rack up a few red cards, yellow cards, suspensions.
Can I just add a caveat to this? What people need to understand, and what you'll understand as well, mate, is that he was playing under Sergio Conceição this time. Okay, yeah. So you need to. There's a Conceição tax when it comes to the suspensions, because Conceição brings out that of a lot of players. I think he adds that kind of warrior mentality. Yeah. So perhaps that can account for some of it.
Yeah, but it does also give you an insight into the type of player he is. Like, he does put his heart, passion, body out there. The Conceição thing is very, very true. It's like playing, on the Simeone. He's just like, you just expect it to be fiery out there on the pitch. But I like it. You need some characters like that too to add a bit of fire, a bit of feistiness to the pitch. But let's move on to, we discussed it backstage a little bit, and it kind of leads me into Mohammed's donation. Thank you very much. If I had to compare him to a player, again, guys, it's not like for like, it's exactly like this guy is the Iranian Dzeko. But if you told me like to describe him to Inter fans coming in, I think Dzeko is a good comparison point, because he's big guy, but he's quite technical, able to bring the ball down, bring others into play. Not the most clinical, but can score really like spectacular goals, and runs. He does run as well. He's not lazy striker. Would you agree with the Edin Dzeko comparison?
Well, you know more about Dzeko than I do. I haven't watched Dzeko really since he was at Man City. So I think the comparison I would make, I was thinking about this beforehand. The more contemporary comparison that I would make, which I quite like this, is actually with Harry Kane, in that sense, because I wouldn't go this far, but I have seen people describe him as almost like a hybrid between a 9 and a 10. Personally, I don't quite agree to that extent. For me, he is a striker, and I've seen a few comments about, maybe he's not the most clinical. I would disagree with that as well. I think he's an excellent finisher. I think he was one of the best finishers in the Portuguese league. I think his reliability when it came to finishing was one of his key attributes. But I think the reason I make the Kane comparison is because he has the kind of physicality, in that he's not like a beast, right? He's not like some huge muscular striker, but he's on the taller side, he's on the stronger side, he's got good fitness. He hasn't necessarily got blistering pace, but he can move. And I think one of his key attributes, and the reason I make the Harry Kane comparison is kind of that link up that you described, and his ability to come a bit deeper and get his teammates involved in the attacks, because we talked a lot about goal scoring statistics. He scored like 20 goals pretty much every season, but in Portugal he's scored pretty much a goal every other game the whole of his career. He's got great assist stats actually in Portugal as well. The first season he signed for Porto, he scored 16 goals. First season he signed for Porto, he got 15 assists as well. So it was a really kind of key part of his game. Is like what people describe when they talk about Harry Kane as someone who comes in to get the ball as well. He can do that, but also has the finishing, has the physicality, has enough mobility. I would say it's obviously not his main attribute, but he has enough mobility to be competitive at a high level and against good defenders. And the finishing for me, like I say, I would put finishing as one of his better attributes as a striker. I think he's got that kind of calmness and consistency with the finishing. Not necessarily that he's like the most insanely lethal finisher, but it's that consistency of finishing that when he's in a one-on-one with the keeper, that you feel very confident that he'll take the chance. So I think that's probably the best, just to paint a picture of the type of player he is. I hope that's kind of gives people an idea of the type of player he is. I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, and funnily enough, once you were talking, I added, so here on the data MB chart comparison, I've added, and by the way, I've added 2022-23 Taremi just because it makes a better comparison point because he played more minutes. So you can see, so there's Taremi here in blue, Dzeko in purple, and Harry Kane in green. And look at that, it's almost a trio of almost identical charts, apart from Harry Kane not as good in the aerial percentages. So comparison-wise, I think even the stats back us up there, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and interesting to see him good in the air, because I don't. It doesn't immediately jump to mind him scoring headers, but now I think of it, he probably does.
I think the aerial percentage probably more in terms of just general aerial duels. If
sure. Oh yeah, good point.
Diogo Costa launching the ball up to him, or the centre back.
Yeah.
So that's really good. It's funny that stats back up kind of the eye test on this, that they're quite similar. Let's see if I add Lautaro and let's see how he stacks up against like last season's Lautaro. Yeah, Lautaro is pretty much there too. Lautaro doesn't have the expected assists, which kind of shows, Lautaro last season was pretty much our main guy, whereas Thuram was the guy trying to assist him. But everywhere else, very, very, very similar. Very, very similar. So do you see, I mean, of course, you don't watch Inter as much as I do, but if you had to say this guy is coming in at Inter, do you see him more as the Lautaro alternative or the Marcus Thuram alternative?
Probably the Thuram, because I imagine Lautaro is much more mobile, and a big part of his game is the pace and the running in behind. So I think in that sense, he's probably... Although, to be honest, my honest answer is probably that he's not exactly either. Yeah. He is a different option to both of those, if we're being honest. So I can see that being a good attribute, because I think he's a good option when you need something different. Yeah. If you perhaps you've got a game where you're struggling to break down a team's playing very deep, and you want to bring on someone who's going to almost come in and help that build up from the midfield. I think that's a really good option. But yeah, I think that is the honest answer for him, is that he is probably different to both of those players, and you are getting something different to what you've got now, obviously, except for Dzeko, which that comparison I think is quite accurate. But yeah.
Yeah. He's not the quickest player though. Like I don't think you'll see. I mean, especially now.
No, he's not dribbling past players in a one-on-one really. No.
No, but one thing I noticed, even when we've played him, even though on like the team sheet it will say he's playing up front, I've seen him a lot of times play like left wing almost.
Yeah. I think I saw a heat map of his once. I think it was actually a Rio Ave heat map where he would started as the striker, but his heat map was very much striker and dipping into the left wing. So I think when he comes deep, I think perhaps his favoured side might be to come in to the left side to get a view of goal on his right foot. But he will be starting up front for sure.
Yeah, because I've seen it maybe like in the bigger matches, Conceição used to do that. It's almost like a Mandzukic role where he's like running, he's on the wing, but then they use him in the attacking phase as a striker. But he's actually
and he's played in a few different positions for Porto over the years in a few different formations. Like he's played in a 2 up front, which I think is actually a really interesting use of his skill set. with a strike partnership in terms of him being able to finish, but also being able to link up and assist. That's one of the more intriguing kind of. I don't think he would say that's his preferred because he probably wants to be the starting striker. But actually, from a kind of neutral viewer, that's been one of the more interesting ways to watch him is actually alongside another striker. Porto have had a young Brazilian striker called Evanilson, who's they've kind of brought him in more, and there was a season when he was playing with Evanilson a little bit as a two. So yeah, you can use him in quite a few different ways, and I think versatility will be really useful for him. And I think he will be, because he's going into Inter at 32 years old with two kind of more star names ahead of him up front. So I think he will be open to the idea of like fitting in where he's needed in order to make an impact.
Yeah, into that point, coming into finally maybe, his biggest club now at this stage of his career, what is the kind of view around him in terms of, he's coming off the back of maybe definitely his worst season at Porto in terms of goal involvement, assists, everything. Is the reason, is that something Inter fans should be concerned? Was there a drop off physically, or is it because it was the last year of his contract? Conceição kind of, tried to phase him out. Give us a bit of insight.
Last season was unfortunate, to be honest. It was a bit of a shame because obviously none of us know what happens behind the scenes, but he entered into the last year of his contract. And my assumption would be that he perhaps had an understanding that he would have left last summer. And it didn't happen. And then he ended up in a situation where he was at a club where he'd talked about leaving, and he was under a manager who has an emotional side to him where perhaps it doesn't endear him to have players who have talked about wanting to leave. And also he did deal with an injury, which made him struggle. So I think last season was really unfortunate because it would have been, in my opinion, perfect for him to leave last summer, where Porto would have got a fee for him, not a huge fee because he would have had 1 year left in his deal, but they would have got a fee. And crucially, Taremi would have gone out on a high. And unfortunately, his reputation did suffer a little bit last season in terms of how Porto fans saw him, because he was playing badly when he did play. He wasn't playing very much, and I think they started to lose patience with him. That said, when the season was over, and he did make some better performances towards the end, he did kind of get some of that reputation back. And when everyone sort of understood the situation, because I think it was kind of soft announced that he was going to Inter, so kind of once it was all kind of cleared up and people knew the season was ending, I think people got over it, and he leaves, I think, with most Porto fans' best wishes. But that kind of poor season probably more to do with off-field issues than anything else. And although it does mean he's joining Inter a year older than perhaps he could have joined them, and I don't know whether that will be an issue. And perhaps he hasn't played that much football, so he might be a bit rusty. That's something to keep an eye on. But even going back to before Portugal, when I wasn't following his career, but just looking at the stats that he put up at those clubs, this is a guy that's delivered quite literally every season of his career, other than one. So I think we can all be quite optimistic that he can do it again.
Yeah. And as you said, the year before, funnily enough, Palms mentioned it, he was very close to Milan, AC Milan, the other side of Milan.
Yeah.
They were talking about like a 15, 20 million euro move, which didn't in the end happen. As a neutral, where do you see him fit better in AC Milan's 4-2-3-1 or Inter's 3-5-2?
I like the 3-5-2. I like the sound of that, honestly, with a strike partner, with people kind of on the wings that he can feed and also benefit from. I like that a lot. Although he did actually play 4-2-3-1 at Porto for a long time. So yeah, he could have done either really, but he can fit into a lot of systems, and I think that's one of his main attributes, like I said. But I do personally, and this is actually, I have to caveat, just my personal opinion, but I do like Taremi with the strike partner personally.
Yeah, and I think the best. We'll have to see into. Well, I don't want to include Arnautovic in this conversation. I see him working well with Lautaro, because I think with Thuram he would have to be the main number 9, where I see him more being able to do that, linking up, being like slightly behind Lautaro, taking those long balls from defense and trying to link up with him. Hopefully we sell Arnautovic. And one other thing I like that I've read about him recently, he's already in Milan. Apparently he's been learning Italian. How was his Portuguese, by the way? Did he ever? I don't
I
think he
was
ever
just
picked
about
it
to
up.
say he probably speaks more Italian than he ever spoke Portuguese already.
Because I don't think I ever saw an interview of him in Portuguese.
No, he never did one.
And then also the fact that he kind of, I think he had offers from Saudi Arabia too, and apparently he kind of rejected those two I mean,
Yeah.
his salary is getting tripled now, but still, that's a
Yeah.
good sign, right?
I believe so. And I think the fact that he's played in Qatar already and he's played in like Asian leagues and the Asian Champions League already, he probably is the type of player who still sees Europe as the pinnacle, which I think is a good attitude. Especially at his age, I think he definitely will be aware that, you know, this is the last opportunity he'll get to move to a club of Inter's size. So I think he's ready to embrace it.
Yeah. No, I'm actually really excited. I'm welcome to any new Iranian Inter fans that might be watching this that are interested in, giving us a follow. And as you said, yeah, like, his stats also, even though he had a bad season last year, you can see, just as you were saying, look at the passes completed. This is comparison to the rest of Europe, top 5 leagues. So it shows you in terms of passing, yeah, as you said, key passes, passes completed, shot creating actions, tackles. Look at that. Like, we know that Inzaghi also likes to press high. Tackles 1, tackles in the defensive third, middle third, attacking third. Like, this guy works hard, can tackle, can intercept, gets involved in the play, interceptions. So I'm excited, man. I'm really excited for this player. Through balls, he's in the 99th percentile. So you can see he likes, to try to be creative, try to be incisive, try to be a bit risky. Overall, Albert, the Euro on the other side has started, so I'm going to try to wrap up now. What's your verdict on this free transfer? I am all in. I'm excited for this. I think he will score at least 15 GA or provide 15 goal contributions in this coming season. What's your thoughts on this?
I think as a free transfer, I think it's an incredibly smart bit of business. I think for his age, he's in great condition, and he's hungry and he's got a lot to prove, and he's already proven that he can deliver at a lot of different levels. So I'd be very optimistic. I don't think he'll be playing as many games as he did at Porto or at any other time in his career, really, because I don't think he'll be the star striker. But I think he's the type of player that when you give him an opportunity, he'll work hard, and he has the quality to deliver. So I'm looking forward to watching him myself.
Yeah, exciting. And yeah, he's already there for pre-season now, so he's gonna have the whole pre-season with Inzaghi now. Lautaro and the other guys are still, with Brazil, Euros, Copa America. So he's actually got a nice few weeks to get, integrated into the system with Inzaghi. So hopefully he stays injury free, takes advantage of that. And thank you very much, Albert, for this lovely insight into Mehdi Taremi. Any final words?
No, my pleasure, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to chat about something to do with Portugal and Inter very soon. We usually end up with a Portuguese club against Inter in the Champions League, so probably
I'm sure we'll end up with Benfica or Porto in our group stage.
Absolutely, it's nailed on.
But yeah, make sure you guys check out Long Ball Futebol podcast on all these podcast platforms. They are, like, if you want to know about Portuguese football, honestly, these are the go-to guys, two balanced, unbiased guys who cover Portuguese football. So make sure you check them out. And thank you, everyone that tuned in. Make sure you leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Enjoy Spain versus France on the other side, but make sure to enjoy the Uncle Shama channel. Leave a thumbs up, subscribe. Ciao ragazzi. Forza Inter, Forza Taremi. Thank you, man.